You talk about it in the current tense, and it sounds like you've got some great experiences for your students. It sounds like the students are very much at home in your space. Did you come right into the teaching space like that, or did you kind of pick up some stuff as you went to arrive at this current place where you're currently existing?
I think it's, as I tell my students, like I said, find people who are better than you at things and you can learn from them. And I think it's just trying to be the best teacher I can. And whether it's, feeling guilty if I don't, right? If I have a weakness or something I want to work on and I don't do anything about it, I feel like I'm letting the kids down. But if I do something about it, I'm proud of myself and ultimately proud of what my kids are accomplishing. So I think the first part of it, fixing a problem is admitting there might be one. And I would admit that that was a problem or something that I need to work on, and something I'm constantly working on. It's not like I'm an expert in or anything, but making sure that, for example, today we were talking about New Year's resolutions, and mine is organization. And I had them look at my equipment room, and it's a mess.
Okay.
But I said, okay, what's more important, this equipment room or you? And I have my lesson plan really well, really planned out, and I have these awesome things and these awesome concepts I want to teach my kids, but my equipment room can wait.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, more important. I'm like, for sure. So I'll get to that once I know that I have you, my most important possession, I guess, because I'm in charge of it at that moment, and then I can go back to my organization. But just I don't know, making sure I understand they're the most important thing, and I want to make sure I get myself prepared the best I can. That's why I did the national board certification. I mean, it just makes you think of every little detail, and that's somewhat why I kind of transitioned how I teach, because it made me focus on every little detail. But that's once again surrounding myself with people who have done the national board and who have done these things that have helped me along the way. So just seeking out people that can help you, which can ultimately help your kids.
So what I think I'm hearing, I want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, is thing number one for anybody interested in moving in this direction is identify potential mentors, identify potential resources, human resources that can provide explicit information for you that can kind of break down some of the contemporary problems, quote unquote problems, that you are experiencing, and provide some ideas, some direction toward where to head next. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And like Twitter is a good example. I mean, I've reached out to so many people about certain topics and how to get better at certain things. And there's never been a time where someone's not replied, right? Like we're all here to help. And, I would just advocate for everyone to put themselves out there and ask questions, because I wrote a blog on this. I said, asking questions doesn't make you look dumb. It makes you look interested and curious. And we talk about being inquirers in our classroom a lot, and how the more questions you ask, the more knowledge you're going to gain. And then, the more confident you're going to become. But it takes, sometimes fourth, fifth graders, especially, they're afraid to ask questions. So we practice asking questions, right? They think it makes them look dumb. But then we talk about how they're so much more successful because they took that risk to ask the question, because now they know it for the test and can apply further. But yeah, just putting yourself out there, I would say. Ask those questions.
That makes all the sense in the world. So in addition to Twitter, any other platforms that you would highlight?
Well, so through Twitter, now we get resources from the people that I connect with, right? So, for example, Kenidra and Kate, I didn't feel that comfortable with my EDI knowledge, and I connected with them to join a little group that hold together resources. And maybe we can link this to the notes, but there are tons of resources on how to appropriately apply these EDI concepts within the physical education classroom. And they worked really, really hard, and I'm so proud I joined that group, because I've learned so much. So maybe we can link that to the notes so people can check it out.
That absolutely has to happen. We totally agree. Fantastic. So I know Twitter has those resources. I know Facebook. People look up a lot of different groups collectively on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I got to tell you, I've never found, other than personal colleagues of mine, friends of mine that are teachers. I've never found like a group on Instagram. Do you know of any?
I'd like to, can I share out one resource which
Come
has
on.
really helped me? The Southern Poverty Law Center's education side is called, it's now called Teaching for Justice. Used to
Okay.
be called Teaching Tolerance. No, it's Learning for Justice. And they have a whole curriculum. They actually have standards, they have objectives and benchmarks that actually to help teachers implement an anti-bias approach,
Yeah.
which is again, it's what Gloria Ladson Billings and Django Paris talks about, is that focusing first on the identity of your students. And Kyle, I really want to give you I want to give you your flowers for taking yourself out, being that confident in who you are and taking yourself out of the voice and allowing your students, the new ones, to come in and teach your class something. Because now that's that essence of teaching through the lens of your students, giving them the power and adding that flavor of their culture to your classroom. I always think of it like a pizza. We have the standard cheese pizza through that westernized view of teaching. I teach, we do, you do,
Right.
which is a very westernized way of teaching. But now when I allow my students to add in the mozzarella cheese and the oregano and peppers and pepperoni and sausage, now I have a much more flavorful pizza that encompasses everyone in your classroom. And I love the fact that you use questions like foods. Music is another one. What is your music? That's another thing to do, is like have a day where always listen to your kids' music first, though. I got caught about that.
I got to be careful.
And let me tell you, Public Enemy is great when you're teaching a jump roping unit. But, even adding that flavor of the music in, that you're not always the one picking the music, allowing your students to bring in their music. And then you learn more about them. And then you can be like, okay, I got you on that. Let me let you listen to a little bit of Nas or Eric B and Rakim or something. You play yours and I'll play mine.
Yeah.
But that's a great resource too for teachers. Also, Welcoming Schools has lesson plans
Welcoming
that
Schools.
teachers can integrate into their lessons as well. Takes a little bit of creativity of how you might take a lesson about differences and inclusion, and how would you put that into your PE. But I love the fact too, Kyle, that you're willing to go outside the box of our kids always being active the entire time, beginning to end, where you take that time to have those critical conversations with your students. I don't think we do that enough.
Yeah, truly the spirit of physical literacy, wouldn't you say so? Yeah. Additions to that, Kyle?
Yeah, so a lot of good things you said there about well, I think it's important to, after an activity, to reflect and talk about what just happened, right? So what was your favorite part of the activity? What was most memorable? Why was that most memorable? Okay, so maybe someone let you go first in the group, okay? That is a small little thing, but actually could help the group become successful, because now there's no whining about who's first, because someone was actually nice enough to say, you know what, you can go first. So you could do rock, paper, scissors, but I always say the nicest kids say, well, you can go first. They know they're going to get a turn eventually. So I remember this is last year, and we were talking about memories and like how tough it is to be the new kid. And someone raised their hand. They're like, in kindergarten, Adrian came up to me and said, "You want to be my friend?" And he still remember that several years later. And we were just like highlighting those small little things that we can do. So, because we had a new kid today too, and I usually ask new kids like, okay, who's made you feel really comfortable, or who's asked you questions, and they get the biggest smile on their face for helping out. And I talk about how, raise your hand if you've ever been the new kid on a team, and just understanding that it's tough to be a new kid, and put yourself in their shoes and doing whatever you can to notice them, to recognize them. But that never would have happened if you didn't reflect on it, or at least talked about it a little bit, and to highlight those things, right? That's important to me. I never ask how many points they got. I really don't care. I asked, what made it so special? What made it fun? What was your favorite thing about your partner? I mean, and that's once they understand that's what's important to you, you'll get a lot accomplished. And now you can see those translate to other classes too, those skills, whether it's patience, right? We played a tag game today that the first level was walking, and I was praising this patience. And I said, why is it important to be patient? And when's the time that you didn't feel like you were patient, and what happened, and all this stuff. And so just using those life skills in lessons, but reflecting on them as well and seeing how they can apply in other classes as well, I think.
It's interesting because we have so many examples of how, we'll just use the example of patience, how something like patience manifests in so many different households across the nation. And one could consider the idea of how patience manifests explicitly culturally independent of whomever is being represented in your classroom. And so in one person's classroom, if they've got 7 brothers and sisters and they get called for dinner, and the idea that they're going to go downstairs and be patient largely means that they're going to miss out on their favorite part of dinner because the rest of their brothers and sisters are scarfing it up. They're probably going to come back to your classroom and they're going to say, Mr. Bragg, you told me to be patient yesterday, but I'm not feeling that because I'm hungry. What is your response? What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, and sometimes like I say things that they go tell their parents, and like let's say I talk about eating healthy, and then their mom's like, "Thanks a lot, Mr. Bragg. Now my kids are all talking about bananas and celery, and we don't buy that." And they're telling me to shop in the perimeter of the store, and so it is funny, but to that point, understanding that, I guess teaching them, situations are different, right? So um, that's a good point. I don't really know about how I would respond to that, and that's never specifically came to me. What do you think, Sue? How would you respond to that?
Well, I love the fact, and that's like really that part of that critical consciousness is that, culturally, we react to things differently. They did a study of looking at kids who tattled on other kids, and the reactions of the teachers to that tattling. When it was white kids tattling on white kids, teacher told the kids, go handle your business, just handle it, work it out. When it was kids tattling on black kids, that teacher was corrective with that black student. And I actually had a kid do that one time, and they blamed something on Derek. Well, Derek wasn't even in school that day. He wasn't even in the classroom. They had been so used to targeting Derek, and who was the only black young person in this first grade classroom. So I love that you look at, hey, we all deal with something. How do you deal with anger? And there's times where I've come in and I've been upset, and I'm like, man, I really feel angry today. What do you do? What does your community do? How does your family handle anger? If you have kids that are screaming and yelling, that's a lot of times, that's what they do at home. And that's how they have to handle it at home. A lot of times kids have to walk away from something and don't want to talk about it. And I have to be mindful. Because at first I'd be like, no, you got to talk about it. And I realized, no, that's not what this kid needs right now. They need somebody who's just going to let this kid, feel comfortable in who he is. And always just say, hey, I'm here for you if you need to talk. I'm always a resource for you. But I understand that who you are, or through the beliefs and the values that you've been taught. I can't tell you how many times my students have said, we don't talk about our business in public. What happens at home or what happens in our community stays in our home. And they bring that to school, and it's such a weight for them to carry. And you can just see when they walk into this classroom, and I'm like, hey, do you need to talk? No, I'm good. Let me know if you need something. A lot of times they'll take off and they'll go out and walk the field or something. And as long as I can keep an eye on them and I know what they're doing, I get it.
Yeah, so Sue, it sounds to me like you're really expressing a caring, an interest, in identification of the singular student, the individual student. The most important thing in any classroom, and Kyle, I think you alluded to this earlier, the most important thing in any classroom is the student. And so as we attenuate our lessons, our curricula to that student, and allow them to the best of our ability to internalize our curricula by bringing it home to them, I think more times than not, we're going to be successful. And to your point, Kyle, the challenge arises when we're literally in your example speaking a different language. So those moments where we identify, okay, this student is coming from a home that maybe is near a food desert. I'm making these great suggestions with regard to a nutritious breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're actually really challenged by the access in that space. So how can I individualize the instruction for them? This person is coming from a home that really gets to the heart of what does it mean to be a man in that home, right? The male figure in that home is like, this is what it means to be a man. And this person comes in with those biases, and I'm left standing there going, all right, well, that sounds like toxic masculinity to me, but let's see how I can augment my curriculum so that it kind of brings you along, this idea of bringing folks along. Does that sound about right to everybody?
One thing that I've seen some teachers do, and they're amazing, is that they spend time in the community. So they know. Nora Ryan in the Houston Independent School District is great at this. She spends lots and lots of time in her community and in the school community where the students come from. There aren't, they are food deserts. They're not grocery stores in the area. Most of the students are on some type of public assistance. Many of the students are undocumented. And one thing that she's really focused on is providing those resources to her students. So she's partnered with different types of nutritional services to bring in, or nutritional groups, like whether they're growing gardens or vegetables and fruits. She brings in the nutrition department to talk about how do we bring in more, how do we provide more resources to our students. So now that we don't look at them as kids who don't have something, is how do we map them now be kids who do have something?
Sue, that's a good point about community and just being aware of what's around you. We do a wonder wall, and I ask them questions, and they, sometimes they ask me questions what they want to know more about. So my question one time was, what would you like to learn more about that we don't necessarily do? And one time they put several people put martial arts, and I don't teach that, and I really don't know how to teach it, to be honest. But I found a community member or someone in the community that does know, and he's like a world champion. So just by researching, I made some calls. He came in for free. He taught every kid some respect things that they really bought into. He let every kid break a board, those like reusable boards. And because we listen to our students and research them out, so community members are willing to help most of the time. All he asks us to do is hand out his flyers, which I don't care. So maybe he'll get some business. But my point is, like, there are things in the community that we can access that sometimes people just skip over and say, well, we don't have that. Well, does your community have that? Someone in your community? Another one that we did was I invited an NBA basketball player on the Phoenix Suns.
Wow.
Because I found someone that knew someone in the Phoenix Suns organization, and I reached out anyway, does anyone come in and talk to the kids about motivational stuff? And we got, it was unbelievable.
That's fantastic.
He talked about Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, all these kids, LeBron James, all these kids all these athletes that the kids knew. And they're like, no way, you know him. And he talked about how he got to where he was. He worked hard in school, and like all these things are available to lots of communities. We just got to take the time and figure out what we can do to meet the needs, to help the kids, to motivate the kids. And sometimes they're tired of listening to Mr. Bragg all the time, hopefully not, but they, to bring someone in the community that hopefully will do it for free. That's pretty cool.
That is cool. The idea of instructor fatigue, I guess, would be one example. But what are some other examples that you believe students might be missing out on if we don't engage our community partners like that? Either Kyle or Sue, your thoughts?
One thing I would say, and partner off of that, Kyle, I found out what gifts and things, gifts and that my parents had. And with that, had family who moved from Italy, and dad loves rugby. Came in and ran a 2-week rugby unit with my students. And they loved it, especially my middle grade students, my middle school students. Also, I had a parent who had played, she played cricket in India, brought cricket to my students as well. We were the school I was at, I was the No Place for Hate coordinator. So I brought in a lot of the resources through the ADL of being through our No Place for Hate initiative, and then brought in, I'm a big one about using children's literature. And I love when you talked about, Kyle, Just Ask. Sonia Soltemeyer has a children's book called Just Ask. If you have a question about a kid, and they have all these different scenarios of children. When children has a peanut allergy, and it tells the child tells a story about himself, and what does school need to look like for that child with a peanut allergy. So I try to partner with books, but I got that also through the ADL and the Holocaust Museum.
Love that. That's cool.
Any additions, Kyle?
I just keep on thinking of asking questions. I think they need to be taught how to ask questions and how to ask follow-up questions, and show that you're genuinely interested, not just what they ask, but how they ask it, what kind of tone of voice they use, how they're sitting up. Are they slouching? Are they even looking at you? I mean, obviously some cultures, they don't do that. You don't have to look, or they might even be scared to look. So I think it's important to talk about that too, and understand how different cultures have different expectations, but showing a genuine interest in what they're asking about, and saying, I always say the easiest way to ask a follow-up question is, tell me more about that, and then, because everyone feels comfortable about talking about things that they're comfortable with, right?
Sure.
So if John asked me a question, he said, tell me more about that. Well, I'm already pretty confident in this scenario, and he's showing a general interest in what I'm saying, and I can give examples, which helps John understand it more, but also almost builds me up and builds my confidence, because I'm already comfortable doing it. And it just, the more you kind of talk about something, the more opportunities you can have to make connections, I think, right? So it's kind of like when you say, if I ask John, where are you from? John could say, New Jersey or whatever, or he could say, well, I was raised in New Jersey, but, I have ties to Texas. My parents are from here. And then the person listening can reach and grab on to 5 different things, and they're trying to connect, right? So giving the listener an opportunity to connect in multiple ways, versus if you just said New Jersey, then maybe I don't know anything about New Jersey, and now the conversation is done. So spreading your wings and allowing them to attach to anything, it's that's more of like a 4th, 5th grade thing, but I think it's important, and adults can do that too.
Totally agree. 100%. Sadly, I do believe we are short on time. This has been an amazing conversation, in my opinion. I've learned so much from you, Kyle. I've learned so much from you, Sue. Thank you very much. Any last thoughts before we head out?
I would just say, yeah, like I said, appreciate you guys having me on and having both of us on. I would just say, try to find out as much as you can about each kid, and making sure you're doing whatever you can to make them feel comfortable, and making everyone feel included, whether it's teaching them how to help people up, whether it's teaching them how to say, you can join us, and then praise that, and praise what's most important to you, because ultimately, I would say 85-90% of students are going to meet your expectations. Set those high, making sure whatever is important to you, you clarify, you demonstrate, you have them practice within activities, and then they'll ultimately reach those, and you'll be proud that you did. So set clear example expectations, and practice, and praise, and I call it praise the praiser too. So if John's complimenting Sue, we're complimenting John for complimenting Sue, right? And that just creates that culture that you'd like to see. So
right on. Cultural creation. I love it. Sue, before we go,
I just want to thank you, Kyle, for spending some time with us. I appreciate for you being a risk taker, or is it courageous now in the in the ID world? But I appreciate you for being a risk taker and coming on. I know when I reached out, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. These are the things, this is not my area, but I think it very much is. And I appreciate your voice in this. You've made me think about things a lot, and you've given me some great ideas on things to do next week when I see my students as a TA. So I appreciate the time that you've set aside. And John, I want to say thank you for being an amazing facilitator throughout this. I appreciate all the ways that you were able to tie in all the concepts and bring Kyle's experience to life. Kyle, I do have one question though before you leave. if I was a student, if I was to ask one of your students to describe Coach Bragg and the PE experience, what would be 3 words that I would hear them say?
We talk about focus a lot. It's probably focused, probably fun.
Oh, better start with an F.
I'll say focus, fun, and understanding. I think understanding is a big one, because everyone's different and everyone comes from a different place, as we talk about, and just understanding what they're going through, and then teaching students also how to understand what others are going through. So understanding, and everyone's different. So yeah, hopefully they would say.
Sounds like an edifying classroom. So thank you so much to both of you, and folks who are listening. We've got a toolkit put together for you with questions, with resources, and I hope you are able to apply yourselves in this space and make your physical education space one of greater learning, greater literacy, and greater for the future to come. So thanks so much, and we'll be signing off.